Tonight on CFTK-TV News, the BC RCMP busted an ultra-sophisticated drug lab. Fraser Health has some new tools that help people recover from debilitating conditions. And we have some of the latest remarks from the U.S. presidential candidates.
Northwest BC's only television news team. We are CFTK-TV News.
Good evening, I'm Cale Maslin, and here's what's making news in the Northwest and beyond today. Northern Health has put out a statement by detailing that there has been an increase in overdoses in Prince Rupert linked to drugs sold as down. Of many recommendations to prevent future overdoses from occurring, Northern Health urges people to carry naloxone, don't mix drugs with alcohol, and to download the Lifeguard or Be Safe app if one is using alone. They also recommend using local supports like the Prince Rupert Specialized MHSU outreach or drug checking in and sample collection in Terrace. After a fair amount of what were said to be near accidental misses involving emergency vehicles that were located near the Kitimat Fire Hall, some precautions have been taken to try and prevent said accidents. The fire hall now has had new painted line road markings added just outside of both sides of the station, and they automatically become active to give the emergency vehicles the right of way whenever they need to get out to an emergency situation quickly. The first responders working at the hall are hopeful that the lines will work well, as a reminder to local residents to be cautious whenever they happen to drive by the hall, and now they no longer have to guess where it's safe to be whenever any of the vehicles are activating. The Kitimat RCMP just released their weekly report for the dates between October 24th up until the 30th. Included in the report is an overnight windshield break, a prohibited driver, as well as a possible impaired driver. There was also a single vehicle collision on Monday, October 26 at the 1900 block of Kitimat Village Road. Mounties say that they busted the largest and most sophisticated drug lab in Canadian history in a small BC town. A massive takedown they believe saved thousands of lives. As CTV's Ben Milcher reports, RCMP connected the operation to Mexican drug cartels and say that the investigation isn't over yet.
This is a war weapon.
This .50 caliber sniper rifle, one of 89 firearms seized by Mounties, including restricted handguns and AR-15 style rifles. It's all part of an investigation into what the RCMP calls the largest and most sophisticated drug lab in Canadian history.
The precursor chemical in combination with the finished fentanyl products seized at this location could have amounted to 95 million potentially lethal doses of fentanyl.
In addition to 54 kilos of fentanyl, police also seized 390 kilos of meth, 35 kilos of cocaine, and 15 kilos of MDMA. Police say the lab was busted in the small community of Falkland, about 40 kilometers west of Vernon. After a months-long investigation, on Friday, officers conducted simultaneous raids on that property and two in Surrey, which is where they found most of the guns. Based on the techniques used to make the drugs, investigators believe there is a connection to cartels in Mexico, but would not get more specific.
These are highly motivated, highly sophisticated criminals whose allegiances change, and they'll make deals with other groups and these kinds of things. But you heard me mention today about Mexican cartels and transnational criminals.
Police don't believe the drugs were intended for sale in Canada or the United States, but would not say what countries they were destined for, saying that would compromise ongoing investigations. Police also seized $500,000 in cash. Despite the scale of the operation and the size of the weapons cache, only one person has been arrested so far. Gaganpreet Randhawa faces 6 drug and weapons charges, and police say he remains in custody. Ben Milcher, CTV News, Vancouver.
Coming up next, the Metro Vancouver Mayor's Council has a request for the BC provincial government. Welcome back. Earlier this morning, the Ministry of Water, Land and Resource Stewardship said a high stream flow advisory is set to hit 4 areas of BC's west coast, including the north coast. It covers all communities in between Prince Rupert and Terrace. The current forecast indicates potential for moderate to heavy rainfall on Monday. However, it's still uncertain on the location and intensity of when the heaviest rainfall will occur. Now that the NDP is back in power, the Metro Vancouver Mayor's Council is pressuring the province for more transit funding. The group says it needs billions to avoid cuts and calls it a doomsday scenario if a commitment isn't made soon. CTV's Isabella Zavarisi has more.
A group of Metro Vancouver mayors are home after taking their transit funding concerns to Parliament Hill.
I've returned from Ottawa with not a pile of federal money, but something else.
While Mayor Brad West fights the flu, it didn't stop him from getting back to work and calling on the re-elected NDP government to commit to funding transit projects.
So that we can avoid that doomsday scenario of significant cuts and reduction to service across the region.
That doomsday deadline West is referring to is April 30th.
Certainly that is very much our objective. Whether we can complete that is not currently clear.
The Mayor's Council says if new funding solutions aren't put in place by then, TransLink will not be able to maintain current services past January 2026.
We have to do some cuts. It's going to be dramatic. Some of the cities are going to lose a considerable amount of their bus transportation. Even the SkyTrain lines, and the Canada line, there's going to be cuts on those lines as well.
TransLink is facing a $600 million annual shortfall. The mayors are asking senior levels of government for $2.9 billion per year to be put toward a 10-year expansion project. Council Vice Chair Malcolm Brody wants to meet with the province immediately.
There's real consequences if we can't all get to the table and work something out in the immediate future.
The NDP says it's working on forming a new cabinet. Once that's determined, a meeting with the Mayor's Council will be held. Isabella Zavarisi, CTV News, Vancouver.
The Vancouver Police Board has launched an investigation into complaints about how police handled pro-Palestinian protests. Advocates say they used excessive force and overstepped with their surveillance. The board is taking action now, but critics question whether it'll be a fair process. CTV's Craig Krause has the story.
Squares and streets in Vancouver have been home to pro-Palestinian protests and public demonstrations for more than a year. Regular attendees have been Vancouver police officers deployed in an attempt to keep the peace, but now complaints have been filed against the VPD.
It's about the chronic, pervasive surveillance of protests in support of Palestinian human rights.
The BC Civil Liberties Association with Pivot Legal Society filed this complaint along with another, accusing police of excessive force while responding to a demonstration at CN Rail in May, resulting in 13 arrests.
I personally witnessed people punched, kicked, hit, pepper sprayed, and shoved down.
The police board responding to the complaints on Thursday.
There is now criminal charges being laid against them in accordance with the board's own policy. This service and policy complaint will be deferred until after the criminal charges have been concluded.
As for the surveillance complaint, the board did recommend an external investigator.
After careful review, we determined that Bob Rolls would be an appropriate external investigator.
Rolls, a former Vancouver Police Deputy Chief, now retired. The BC Civil Liberties Association reacting moments after the announcement.
So difficult to believe that there wouldn't be bias. I just think it's disgusting. I think it's a show, it's a theater, it's not at all intended to get at the gravity of the issues.
In the meantime, the police board says Rolls will have full access and no restrictions to resources and believes bias won't be a factor. As for how long the investigation could last, it remains unclear. Craig Krause, CTV News, Vancouver.
Getting back to normal after a stroke or another debilitating condition can be grueling. But as CTV's Mark McMahon reports, Fraser Health's getting creative with 2 new robotic tools aimed at helping patients recover.
Nice. Good job with your wrist. Really good.
Physical rehab can be tough, but GBS patient Linda Misetovic is made of sterner stuff.
You have to be positive. You break down, but you got to be positive. I got my mom's blood, so I'll get through this.
Misetovic is seen here using the Armeo Power, one of 2 recently donated robotic-assisted rehab devices which staff at Queen's Park Care Centre in New Westminster have been using for a few weeks now. The tools have a gaming component as well.
Some of the games are very real life based, so things like grocery shopping really get our patients to be more in context, and that just helps with building those neural connections again.
The second new device is the Locomat. Stroke patient Leanne Mork is strapped into an exoskeleton and suspended over a treadmill. And like a big game athlete, she sets a new personal best in front of our CTV camera.
You got first. Oh, it was fun. I'm hoping that we can keep doing it.
The device allows more activity for patients earlier in their rehab journey.
Yeah, so with the robotic device, we are able to see the low to moderate level patients, when with the regular harness patients, they are more towards the moderate to higher level.
I can safely say, like, if we would not have been donated, like, it would have been very difficult for us to acquire this technology and have it placed in a Fraser Health site. And I think we are very grateful to our donor who actually made this possible.
And thanks to stroke patient and Royal Columbian Hospital Foundation donor Toanne Wynn, those also going through rehab have a robotic boost, one step at a time. Martin McMahon, CTV News, New Westminster.
Turning to tonight's weather, the north coast is expecting increasing cloudiness plus a low of 3 degrees. The Terrace-Kitimat area will deal with a few clouds of its own and a low down at -2 degrees. And the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District should get a few clouds and a low dropping to -7 degrees. On the north coast, the upcoming week will consist of essentially only rain, while the high bounces between 7 and 10 degrees. In the Terrace-Kitimat area, the week for them similarly should only get rain as well, with potentially some snow, and the high will shift from 2 to 7 degrees. And in the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District, the next week or so will deal with more mixed conditions with various bits of rain, clouds, snow, flurries, and possibly even some sun, as the high will jump between 2 and 8 degrees. Checking out the highways now, visit Drive BC for the latest and up-to-date conditions, and as always, drive safe out there. On Highway 16, there is slippery sections, maintenance work, utility work, construction work, ditching, and a vehicle recovery. Highway 118 has some roadside brushing. Highway 37 has some utility work, roadside brushing, and slippery sections, some construction work and bridge maintenance on the Nishka Highway, and the Telegraph Creek Road has some slippery sections. And this is what the roads were looking like this afternoon around the region from the view of the province's highway cams. Still to come, all of the major Canadian banks have some new rules to follow. Welcome back. All of Canada's major banks now have to answer to the Ombudsman for banking services and investments if they can't resolve an issue on their own. Several banks previously used their own Ombudsman services to deal with complaints, but that's been criticized as self-serving and unfair. Here's CTV's Pat Forward with more.
Some of Canada's largest banks have been able to hire their own third-party ombudsman to deal with complaints, something that's been referred to as similar to a hockey team hiring and paying the referee. But starting November 1st, the Ombudsman for Banking Services and Investments will oversee complaints involving the Royal Bank of Canada, Toronto Dominion Bank, National Bank of Canada, Bank of Nova Scotia, and Tangerine Bank.
So many Canadian consumers are falling victim to fraud.
The changes come at a time as fraud cases are rampant at Canadian banks, with criminals targeting customers with various scams.
Every bit of money that I had is totally gone.
I'm not giving up because it's too much money for me to give up.
Ombudsman and CEO Sarah Bradley says consumers will still have to try and resolve issues with their bank, but if they're not satisfied with the outcome, they can have their case reviewed again by the Ombudsman's office.
We're free of charge. We're independent of the banks. We understand the banking system and the regulations that are in place, and we're here to make sure that the banks are treating their consumers fairly.
If you're choosing and paying your own judge, you know you're going to get more favorable decisions for yourself.
Duff Conacher with Democracy Watch has been a critic of the current system and calls the change as a good start, but feels rulings by the Ombudsman's office should be considered binding and not recommendations.
This is a half step of good news, and we need the other step, which is to give the Ombudsman the power to make binding orders when the banks abuse or treat a customer unfairly.
Though non-binding, Bradley says its recommendations have been followed by the banks and encourages clients who feel wronged to reach out.
If they have a problem with their bank or their investment firm, they're not on their own. There is a place that they can turn. We're independent, and we're here to help.
Pat Foran, CTV News.
Alberta's UCP government unveiled its long-promised policies aimed at transgender people. 3 contentious bills will prohibit sex reassignment surgery for minors and force schools to notify parents if their child wants to change their name or pronoun. CTV's Tim Brutch outlines the bills and explains who they will impact.
Danielle Smith says her government's 3 newest bills are aimed at protecting kids.
We want children and youth to have the time to gain experience and explore all opportunities available to them as they grow into adulthood.
If passed, that legislation will prohibit sex reassignment surgery on minors and restrict access to puberty blockers and hormone therapies for Albertans under 16.
Those are adult decisions to be made by adults.
There are also changes coming to classrooms. Schools will soon have to notify parents if their child wants to change their name or pronoun, and parents will be required to opt in rather than out of classes teaching about gender identity or sexuality. Sports will look a little different too if the bills are passed. All provincial or school-run leagues will ban transgender females from female sports. But right now, no one in Alberta is performing those soon-to-be banned bottom transitioning surgeries on minors, and top surgeries are, according to the province, exceptionally rare. The health ministry also can't say how many minors are taking puberty blockers, which experts call safe and reversible.
There's an intentional campaign to put out confusing, fear-mongering, baseless information about what's happening.
Look, I mean, if it's not happening at all, then there shouldn't be any controversy around putting the guardrails around it.
When these ideas were first floated in the winter, very few outside of the UCP base were on board. 9 months later, not much has changed.
Punching down on trans kids does not appear in the top 50 of things Albertans are concerned about.
Thousands of Albertans, including doctors and legal experts, have pushed back against this legislation, but the Premier can't point to any changes in the bills following all of that negative feedback.
With only a few days left in the U.S. election campaign, both sides are fighting to connect with female voters. Donald Trump said that he will protect women whether they like it or not. Kamala Harris called those remarks offensive to everyone. Here's CTV's Washington Bureau Chief, Joy Malbon.
In a race this tight, words matter. So what to make of Donald Trump's declaration about women should he become president again, saying this even against his own campaign's advice.
I want to protect the women of our country. I want to protect the women. Sir, please don't say that. Why? I said, well, I'm going to do it whether the women like it or not.
While his supporters loved it, Kamala Harris quickly pounced, putting out this campaign ad.
Whether the women like it or not. Whether the women like it or not.
With bold headlines about abortion, reminding voters of Trump's role in overturning reproductive rights in America.
It actually is, I think, very offensive to women, their right and their ability to make decisions about their own lives, including their own bodies. And this is just the latest on a series of reveals by the former president of how he thinks about women.
Trump has a troubling track record with women. Polls show that he's trailing Harris among female voters, but doing well with men.
How do you like my garbage truck? This truck is in honor of Kamala and Joe Biden.
Trump seized on Joe Biden's blunder when the president tried to condemn the comic who made racist jokes at Trump's Sunday rally.
And just the other day, a speaker at his rally called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage.
The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters.
The White House insists Biden misspoke, but Trump dug in, doing some trash talking of his own.
She's a stiff. She's a total stiff, and she lies. She's worse than crooked Hillary.
Both candidates head out west, Harris campaigning with stars like Jennifer Lopez, trying to capitalize on Latino anger. And Trump takes the stage in Nevada and New Mexico. Joy Malvin, CTV News, Washington.
The deaths rose catastrophically after some flooding in Spain. Over 150 people are confirmed dead and many more are still missing. The Valencia region was hit with a year's worth of rain in an 8-hour span. ABC's James Longman reports.
New video tonight shows the sheer force of Spain's worst flooding in decades. As the death toll soars, more than 150 people killed, scores more still missing. Watch as that muddy river of debris comes pouring into the city of Paiporta. A catastrophic torrent of water surging through this neighborhood in Valencia. Cars washed away. Neighbors tying sheets together to help save this woman caught in the deluge. Emergency services working through the night, searching for bodies in this inundated parking garage. This woman calling out for her missing loved one. Teams in helicopters scanning the city for any signs of survivors, conducting hundreds of rescues. Here, lifting this 1-year-old baby to safety. Apocalyptic scenes, this train line littered with vehicles, cars tossed about like toys. 1 year's worth of rain fell here in just 8 hours, leaving people little time to escape.
And now we turn our attention to how the stock markets look today compared to yesterday. The Canadian dollar is down 0.08 of a cent, the price of gold is down 10 cents, oil is up 23 cents, natural gas is down 5 cents, aluminum is down $5.50, in Toronto the TSX is up 98.29 points, the Venture Index is up 2.52, in New York the Dow Jones is up 288.73, and NASDAQ is up 142.72. Still ahead, seemingly in honor of Halloween, the Canucks' most recent game saw them put forth a truly ghastly performance. The Canucks put in a bad performance versus the Devils, getting shut out 6-0. It's a troubling trend for a team hoping to build on last year's success. Cam Mitchell has the ringside report.
Here come the Devils.
It was a scary start the night before Halloween. Nico Hischier scored on the Devils' first shot of the game, and it only got uglier after that.
Hughes didn't know the pass was coming, and here come the Devils shorthanded.
The Canucks' power play was a mess, illustrated by this brutal goal.
And the Devils score shorthanded to double their lead.
Opening the floodgates for a bunch more.
Obviously, it was, everything went wrong, right from the beginning. And then, obviously some guys were struggling, and it just rolls like that, and you're going to have games like this in an 82-game schedule. We just got to flush it down the toilet right now.
It's of course still early in the season, but one troubling trend has emerged.
And they score!
The Canucks are letting the visitors own them at home.
Scores!
And leave town with 2 points.
Connor Zary gives Calgary a 6-5 win.
The Canucks haven't been sharp in all facets of the game so far.
And he can't get it past the sprawling goaltender.
But the team's upcoming 3-game trip to sunny California should be a good chance to find their game. Cam Mitchell, CTV News, Vancouver.
That's our news for CFTK-TV. I'm Cale Maslin. Thanks for watching.